The city always felt different on Christmas Eve, especially in the 80s. New York was a beast of a place. Loud, sharp, always in a hurry. But on this one night, it seemed to take a breath. The air that bit your cheeks was crisp, clean. It carried the scent of roasted chestnuts and exhaust fumes. I had returned to the city after years away, pulled back by a thread of memory I couldn't quite name. The streets were slick with a fresh dusting of snow, a white blanket trying to soften the city's hard edges. It was a fool's errand, of course. Nothing could truly soften New York. Snow fell in big, lazy flakes, each one a tiny star catching the light. And there was so much light. Neon signs buzzed in every window. Wet pavement lit in electric pink. Wet pavement lit in acid green. A record store's sign blinked Sam Goody in a frantic red rhythm. Across the street, the Macy's windows were a world unto themselves, not just displays, miniature theaters telling stories of magic and wonder. Crowds of people stood mesmerized, faces upturned, breath misting in the cold. I watched them, feeling like a ghost at a party I had once been invited to. I pulled the collar of my wool coat tighter. A ridiculous coat, shoulder pads so big I looked like a linebacker. It felt like a costume from another life. The sounds of the city were a symphony of organized chaos. A boombox on a corner blasted a tinny version of Christmas in Hollis by Run DMC. Yellow cabs honked through the slush. Tires made a shushing sound. In the distance, a siren wailed. A reminder this was still New York. The city was alive, a breathing thing. Its pulse was a beat you felt in the soles of your shoes. This was the New York I remembered. Sharp contrasts, vivid sensations. A city that didn't care if you were lonely, yet could make you feel surrounded. I walked past a subway entrance as warm, metallic air rose to meet me. Posters on the wall, faded and peeling. Advertising movies that were already classics, and soda that tasted sweeter in memory. Everything felt the same, yet different. Or maybe it was me who was different. I was older now, carrying regrets heavier than the shopping bags in everyone's hands. I was standing on 34th Street, right in the heart of the holiday storm. The crowd was a river of puffy coats, big hair held in place by a prayer and a can of Aquanet, determined expressions of last-minute shoppers. I felt adrift in this river, an outsider watching the current flow by. People laughed and called out to each other, arms laden with brightly wrapped packages. A man in a Santa hat stumbled past, singing a slurred Jingle Bells. Pure, unadulterated holiday cheer. And yet, a profound sadness hung over me, cold and persistent as the winter air. It tied to this very block, to a Christmas Eve long ago. A small hand clutched in a larger one. A promise made and then broken by time and distance. I was searching for something I had lost between then and now. I looked at faces in the crowd, wondering if any of them felt it too. This strange ache of nostalgia, longing for a past you can see and feel but never touch. The city felt like a time capsule. I had pried open the lid. The air that escaped smelled like my childhood. The music was the thing that anchored it all. It drifted from storefronts and from passing cars. A mixtape of the season. Wham's Last Christmas. Bruce Springsteen's Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And then I heard it. A song I hadn't heard in years. A quiet, simple carol, played on a lone guitar. Not a store speaker. It was live. The melody was a key turning a lock inside my chest. I followed it, weaving through the crowd like a dream. The song led me to a young girl, no older than 16. She stood by a steaming cart, guitar case open with a few lonely dollars. Her fingers red from the cold, coaxing melody from the strings. Her voice soft but clear, fragile and cutting through the city noise. She sang with her eyes closed, lost in the music. As I listened, the world began to shift. Neon blurred, traffic faded. The past stopped being just memory. It became a presence. The source of the city's most comforting scent was an old man hunched over a pushcart. A small, glowing brazier sat atop it, its embers casting a warm, orange light on his weathered face. His hands, gnarled like ancient tree roots, turning chestnuts over the heat. Each turn released a puff of fragrant steam mingling with the falling snow, creating a little cloud of pure holiday magic. He wore a thick plaid wool jacket, and a worn-out newsboy cap pulled low over his brow. His eyes, when they occasionally glanced up, were deep-set and kind, holding the quiet wisdom of someone who has watched the city's parade pass by for decades. He seemed as much a fixture of the corner as the lamppost or the mailbox. People flowed around his cart, a few stopping to exchange a crumpled dollar bill for a small paper bag of warmth. He offered each customer the same small, knowing smile, a silent acknowledgement of their shared need for a moment of comfort in the cold. He didn't shout or call out to hawk his wares. The gentle, nutty aroma did all the work for him, a siren song for chilled hands and hungry souls. I watched him for a moment, this quiet king on his small, smoky throne, and felt a strange sense of peace. He was a constant in a city defined by change, a living piece of history roasting chestnuts on 34th Street. I found myself drifting closer, drawn in by the heat and the smell. Arturo looked up as I approached, his gaze lingering for a second longer than it did on the others. It wasn't a suspicious look, but one of mild curiosity, as if he were trying to place my face in his vast mental catalog of New York characters. I fumbled in my pocket for $1, the paper cold and stiff against my fingers. He scooped a small pile of the scorched, fragrant nuts into a paper bag and handed it to me. His fingers brushed against mine for a fleeting instant, and they were surprisingly warm, radiating the heat of his brazier. The simple transaction felt profound, a small act of connection in the anonymous swirl of the metropolis. The chestnuts were hot enough to burn my fingers through the thin paper. I juggled the bag from hand to hand, the heat a welcome sting against the biting cold. The taste was exactly as I remembered. Smoky, slightly sweet, and earthy. It was the taste of winter in New York, a flavor so deeply entwined with my memories of childhood Christmases that it felt like I was eating a ghost. I stood there, leaning against a cold brick wall, peeling the brittle shell from a chestnut and watching Arturo tend to his fire. He was a guardian of a small, warm flame in the heart of the winter city, and I was just one of many who had stopped to bask in its glow. My attention was pulled away from the chestnuts by the sound I had been following, the fragile melody of a guitar. There she was, the girl I had spotted from down the block, standing just a few feet from Arturo's cart. She couldn't have been more than 16 or 17. Her hair was a wild mane of dark curls escaping from a worn-out beanie, and her face was pale with cold, except for the bright red tip of her nose. She wore a denim jacket with band patches sewn onto the sleeves, the Cure, the Smiths, over a thin sweatshirt. It was nowhere near warm enough for this weather. Her jeans were torn at the knees, not as a fashion statement, but from wear and tear. She looked like she had run away from somewhere, and had been running for a long time. Her eyes were closed as she sang, her expression a mixture of concentration and sorrow. Her voice wasn't powerful, but it was pure and clear, a silver thread weaving through the city's cacophony. She was singing Silent Night, but she sang it like a lament, each note filled with a quiet longing that resonated deep in my own chest. An open guitar case lay on the slushy sidewalk at her feet. Inside, a few crumpled dollar bills and some loose change lay scattered on the worn velvet lining. Most people rushed past without a second glance, their minds on their own destinations, their own holiday deadlines. They were deaf to the small, beautiful sadness of her song. She shivered between verses, her fingers fumbling on the fretboard as she tried to keep them nimble in the freezing air. She'd stop for a moment to blow on her hands, her breath a white plume in the air, before bravely starting the next line. There was a stubborn defiance in the way she stood there, making her music against the indifference of the world. She wasn't just singing for money, she was singing to keep something inside her alive. It was a small act of rebellion, a declaration that she was still here, that her voice still mattered, even if no one else seemed to notice. I saw a flicker of my younger self in her, that same mix of vulnerability and a desperate need to be seen. I watched as a man in a business suit, his arms full of glossy shopping bags from Saks, paused for a moment. He listened, his expression unreadable, before shaking his head slightly and hurrying on his way. The girl didn't open her eyes. She didn't seem to register the rejection, or perhaps she was just used to it. She finished her song, the final note hanging in the air for a moment before being swallowed by the sound of a passing bus. She took a shaky breath and, after a moment's hesitation, began to play another carol. Her persistence was both heartbreaking and inspiring. She was a tiny boat of music in a vast, noisy ocean, and she was refusing to sink. As I watched the girl, as I watched the old vendor, a heavy weight settled in my chest. It was the familiar weight of regret, a companion I had carried with me for years. It was especially heavy on Christmas Eve. This block, this very corner, was a minefield of memories for me. I remembered standing here as a child, my hand lost in the warm, safe grip of my mother's. We would look at the Macy's windows, our faces pressed against the cold glass. She would tell me stories about the animatronic elves and reindeer inside. Her voice was the warmest sound in the world, warmer even than Arturo's chestnuts. The memory was so vivid, I could almost feel the rough wool of her coat sleeve against my cheek. I could smell her perfume, a faint scent of lavender mixed with the cold city air. We had a ritual. Every Christmas Eve, we would come here. She would buy me a bag of chestnuts from a vendor who looked a lot like Arturo. We would share them while we waited for my dad to get off work. That last Christmas Eve together, I had made a wish. I wished that we could always be like this, the three of us, together on this street corner, sharing chestnuts under the holiday lights. It was a child's simple, impossible wish. A few months later, she was gone. Not in a dramatic, sudden way, but in the slow, painful unraveling of a long illness. The magic of Christmas Eve on 34th Street vanished with her. The city's lights seemed dimmer after that. The carols sounded hollow. My father and I never came back to this spot together. It was too painful, a monument to what we had lost. I had spent years trying to outrun that memory, moving away from the city, building a new life. But you can never really outrun a ghost, especially when that ghost is a part of you. Returning now felt like picking at a wound that had never properly healed. The chestnuts in my hand were cold now. I looked from the girl singing her sad song to Arturo tending his fire, and I saw echoes of my own story. I saw loneliness. I saw perseverance, the quiet ways people find to survive the cold. My regret wasn't just about losing my mother. It was about losing that feeling of connection, that simple, uncomplicated belief in holiday magic. It was about the wish I had made as a child, a wish for a moment to last forever. And as I stood there, lost in thought, the girl with the guitar began a new song, one I hadn't heard in a very, very long time. The song wasn't a Christmas carol. It was something quieter, more personal. The melody was simple, almost like a lullaby. The words were soft and searching. It was a song my mother used to sing. She wasn't a great singer, her voice was often a little off-key. But she sang it with such love that it sounded perfect to me. She would sing it while she was cooking. She would sing it when tucking me into bed. It was our song. Hearing it now, from a teenage stranger on a street corner in 1980s New York, felt like a glitch in reality. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I stared at the girl, my breath caught in my throat. How could she know this song? It wasn't famous. It was a half-forgotten folk song my mother learned from her grandmother, a piece of our family's private history. For a moment the world tilted. The roar of the traffic, the chatter of the crowds, the flashing neon signs, everything receded into a distant, muffled hum. The only thing real was the girl's voice, and the ghost of my mother's voice singing along in my memory. My eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. The girl sang with her eyes closed, lost in the music. She wasn't performing. She was singing for herself, a quiet prayer into the cold night. The lyrics spoke of finding your way home. They spoke of following a familiar star through the darkness, words I hadn't thought about in 2 decades. They returned with piercing clarity. Each word was a tiny needle pricking my heart, releasing a fresh wave of grief and a sharp, physical longing. I wanted to ask her, grab her thin denim jacket and demand where she'd learned it. But I couldn't move. I stood frozen, a statue, clutching a bag of cold chestnuts. Even Arturo, the chestnut vendor, paused. He stopped turning the nuts and looked at the girl, head tilted. His face was concentrated, as if he recognized the melody too. The air grew thick with unspoken questions. The song was a key, but this time it wasn't only unlocking a memory inside me. It felt like it was unlocking something in the world itself, bending the rules of time and space on a snowy night on 34th Street. The song acted like a strange magnet, creating a small, quiet bubble in the chaos of Christmas Eve. A few other people had stopped to listen now. A young couple, their arms linked, stood silently. A woman with a shopping cart full of empty cans paused her search, her head bowed as she listened. The girl's fragile voice had cut through the noise and captured a small audience. We were a strange, impromptu congregation, united for a few moments by this ghostly melody. The snow seemed to fall a little thicker within our small circle, muffling the sounds of the outside world even more. It felt like we were standing in a snow globe, and someone had just given it a gentle shake. I finally managed to take a step forward, then another. I walked over to her open guitar case and knelt down, the cold of the wet pavement seeping through my jeans. I took out my wallet and pulled out a $20 bill, a small fortune to leave for a street performer. It felt inadequate, a clumsy attempt to pay for a miracle. I carefully placed the bill on top of the few lonely singles. The girl didn't open her eyes. She just kept singing, her voice unwavering. The song was reaching its final verse, a hopeful resolution about a light in a window and a door left unlocked. It was the part that always used to make me feel safe. As I started to stand up, my gaze fell on a payphone booth just a few feet away. It was an old, battered thing, its plastic shell covered in graffiti and grime. The receiver dangled off the hook, swinging gently in the wind. In the strange, heightened reality of the moment, it seemed to pulse with a faint energy. The phone, the song, the vendor, the girl. They all felt like pieces of a puzzle that were slowly clicking into place. The past wasn't just a memory anymore. It was an active presence, a force that was pulling and shaping the present moment. The air felt thin, charged with electricity, like the moment before a lightning strike. The girl sang the last note, and it hung in the cold air, perfect and clear. For a second, there was absolute silence. Even the city seemed to be holding its breath. Then, the spell was broken. The couple started walking again. The woman with the cart rattled on her way. Traffic and sirens rushed back in. But something had changed. The world looked the same, but it felt different. As the last echo of the song faded, a single perfect snowflake drifted down and landed right on the coin slot of the payphone. It rested there for a moment, like a silver coin, before melting away. And in that instant, everything went quiet again. The snowflake that landed on the payphone felt like a signal, a final click of a lock falling into place. The world had gone silent, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was a heavy, expectant quiet, the kind you feel in a theater just as the curtain is about to rise. I stood there, half crouched from placing the money in the guitar case, my eyes fixed on the dangling receiver of the phone. It swayed back and forth, a hypnotist's pendulum marking the seconds. The girl had finished her song and finally opened her eyes, looking down at the $20 bill with a dazed expression. She looked up at me, her mouth slightly open as if to say, "Thank you." But no sound came out. It was as if we were all trapped in a photograph. Then, a sound cut through the stillness. A sound so impossible it made the hair on my arms stand up. The payphone began to ring. It wasn't the shrill electronic brrring of a modern phone, but a deep metallic clanging ring that vibrated through the floor. It was a sound from another era. The girl flinched, her eyes wide with confusion. Arturo the chestnut vendor turned his head fully, his calm demeanor finally broken by a look of sheer disbelief. Payphones don't just ring. They are instruments of outgoing calls only, silent receptacles waiting for a quarter and a plea. This one was ringing with a desperate, insistent rhythm, as if it had been waiting decades for someone to answer. The three of us, me, the teenage runaway, the old vendor, were frozen in a tableau of shared bewilderment. The ringing was the only thing moving in the world. It echoed strangely in the snow-muffled air, a sound both loud and intimately close. It felt like it was ringing just for me. My heart pounded in my ears, a frantic drumbeat against the steady mechanical clang of the phone. Every instinct told me this was impossible, a hallucination brought on by cold and nostalgia. But my feet knew better. They took a step toward the booth, then another, moving with a will of their own, drawn by a force I couldn't explain or resist. I reached the phone booth, its grimy plastic shell seeming to hum with the ringing. My hand trembled as I reached for the receiver. The black plastic was cold and slick with melted snow. It felt heavy, substantial, a relic from a time when communication was a more deliberate act. For a split second I hesitated. What was I doing? Answering a ghost phone on a street corner? It was insane, but the ringing was so persistent, so full of a strange, beckoning promise. It was the sound of a question that needed an answer. Taking a deep, shaky breath that misted in the frigid air, I lifted the receiver to my ear. The moment the receiver touched my ear, the ringing stopped. It was replaced by a soft, fuzzy static, the sound of a long-distance connection, of voices traveling across miles and years. It was the sound of the past. I held my breath, listening to the hiss and the crackle, the sound of an open line to nowhere. I almost hung up, feeling foolish. Of course there was no one there. Faulty wire, a cross signal, a fluke of 1980s technology and winter weather. But then, through the static, a voice emerged. It was faint at first. A whisper carried on an electrical wind. It was a woman's voice, and it was a voice I knew better than my own.
Hello? Hello? Is anyone there?
It was my mother's voice. Not the weak, tired voice from her last few months, but the strong, clear voice from my childhood. The voice that used to read me bedtime stories and sing me lullabies. The sound of it hit me with the force of a physical blow. My knees felt weak. I had to grip the side of the phone booth to keep from falling. All the air left my lungs in a rush.
I know it's a long shot, she said, a little stronger now. This line is terrible, but I wanted to try. We're running a bit late. Tell him we're on our way.
My mind reeled, trying to make sense. Tell him, tell who? We're on our way. My father. She was talking about my father. She was calling to say she and I were running late, to meet him after his shift. A scene from 20 years ago, a conversation I was never part of, played back through a broken payphone on 34th Street. My throat was tight, a knot of unshed tears making it impossible to speak. I tried to form a word. Mom? The sound was just a dry croak. It wouldn't have mattered. She couldn't hear me. This wasn't a conversation. It was an echo.
Just tell him we stopped for chestnuts, she said. I could hear the smile in her voice. He'll know the spot. See you in a few minutes.
And then, with a final crackle of static and a soft click, the line went dead. The only sound was the dial tone, a low, steady hum that signaled the end of the connection. I stood there, receiver pressed hard against my ear, the plastic now feeling warm from my hand. The dial tone hummed on, a final, lonely note from a ghost in the machine. I slowly lowered the receiver, my hand shaking so much that I could barely place it back on the hook. As it clicked into place, the world around me began to change. It wasn't a sudden, jarring shift, but a gentle dissolving, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. The sharp neon glow of the Sam Goody sign softened, its frantic red blinking slowing to a more relaxed pulse. The harsh white streetlights mellowed into a warmer, more golden hue. The hip-hop from the boombox faded away, replaced by the distant, cheerful sound of a Salvation Army bell ringer. The aggressive honks of the 80s cabs were gone, their boxy yellow shapes morphing into the rounder, more classic forms of cars from the 1960s. The girl with the guitar was staring at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. Her denim jacket seemed to flicker, the band patches of The Cure fading in and out of existence. The band patches of the Smiths fading in and out of existence. Arturo's face was a mask of awe. He clutched the side of his cart, his knuckles white, as he looked not at me, but past me, down the changing street. I turned to follow his gaze. The crowd around us had thinned. The women wore simple cloth coats and headscarves, not puffy jackets, not big, hair-sprayed hair. The men wore fedoras instead of beanies. It was subtle, but unmistakable. We were no longer in the 1980s. A strange sense of calm washed over me, replacing the shock. This wasn't frightening. It felt like coming home. The air itself smelled different. The sharp tang of exhaust was still there, but it was mixed with something else. The faint, clean smell of coal smoke from apartment chimneys. The snow under my feet felt crunchier, less sullied by the city's grime. I looked down at my own hands. I was still wearing my ridiculous 80's wool coat, a strange anomaly in this softer world. The girl was still in her torn jeans. We were ghosts here, visitors from a future this world couldn't imagine.
I took a tentative step, my modern shoes feeling clumsy on the vintage pavement. The world held firm. This wasn't a dream. It was solid. It was real. The payphone, the source of the rupture, now looked perfectly normal. Just another piece of street furniture from this earlier time. The girl took a hesitant step toward me, her guitar case held in front of her like a shield. "What's happening?" I didn't have an answer. I just shook my head, my gaze sweeping over the familiar yet alien streetscape. We had slipped through a crack in time, guided by a song and summoned by a telephone call from the past.
The street was quieter now, the frantic energy of the 80s replaced by a more subdued, almost gentle holiday bustle. The Macy's window displays were still there, but they were different. The scenes were simpler, depicting classic stories like "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," with charming, handcrafted puppets instead of flashy animatronics. The light they cast was warm and inviting. As I stared at the display, a movement at the edge of the glass caught my eye. It was a reflection, a woman and a small boy, their faces pressed close to the window. The woman was pointing at something inside, her expression full of delight. The boy was bundled in a thick coat and a red knitted hat, a miniature version of me. My heart stopped. It was her. My mother, younger, healthier, her face unlined by the illness that would later take her. She was exactly as I remembered her from that time, vibrant and full of life. And the little boy beside her, his eyes wide with wonder, was me. I was watching a memory unfold right in front of me, not as a participant, but as a silent observer from the future. My mother laughed at something the boy said, her breath misting in the cold air. The sound was so real, so immediate, that I instinctively took a step toward them, my hand outstretched. I wanted to touch her, to tell her everything, to warn her, to thank her, but I couldn't. An invisible barrier stood between us, the barrier of time itself. I was a ghost at their feast, able to see and hear, but not to interact. The teenage girl had come to stand beside me, her earlier fear replaced by a quiet awe. She looked from the woman and child at the window to my face, and a look of understanding dawned in her eyes. She didn't know the specifics of my story, but she understood the universal language of loss and longing. She saw the ghost I was seeing. She recognized the impossible miracle that was taking place on this ordinary street corner. Arturo the vendor had not moved. He was still staring down the street, but his gaze was fixed on a man walking toward us. The man was young, wearing a simple wool overcoat and carrying a worn leather briefcase. He walked with a tired but determined stride, the stride of a man coming home from a long day's work. It was my father. A younger, more hopeful version of the sad, quiet man he would become. He was looking for someone in the crowd, a small smile playing on his lips. He was looking for his wife and son. He was looking for us. The world of my memory was painted in a different palette. The aggressive pinks and greens replaced by the primary colors of the 60s. The neon signs that remained were simpler, spelling out names like Horn and Hardart in a friendly, looping script of red or blue. The light felt less like an assault and more like an invitation. It was a world that felt slower, more deliberate. People weren't rushing with the same frantic, self-absorbed energy. They strolled, they window shopped, they paused to talk to one another. The city was still a beast, but it was a younger, less cynical one. The edges were still hard, but they hadn't been sharpened by 2 more decades of grit and grime. I watched as my father spotted my mother and me by the Macy's window. His tired face broke into a wide, genuine smile, a smile I hadn't seen in so many years. He quickened his pace, calling out my mother's name. She turned, her own face lighting up as she saw him. They met and he wrapped his arms around her, lifting her off her feet in a brief, joyful hug. It was a moment of pure, unguarded love, a private scene played out on a public stage. I watched them, my throat thick with emotion. This was the magic I had lost. This was the warmth I had been chasing. It wasn't about the lights or the gifts, it was about this connection. The teenage girl beside me let out a small, quiet sigh. I glanced at her and saw that her tough, streetwise facade had completely fallen away. Her face was soft, her eyes filled with a wistful sadness. Perhaps she was thinking of her own family, of a home she had run away from, of a connection she had lost or maybe never even had. In this shared moment of impossible nostalgia, we were no longer a jaded man and a runaway teen. We were just 2 lonely souls witnessing a perfect moment of happiness. A glimpse into a world where families were whole and love felt simple. The cold of the evening seemed to recede, pushed back by the warmth radiating from the scene before us. My father then knelt down and scooped my younger self into his arms, burying his face in my little red hat. My mother stood beside them, her hand on my father's back, her expression one of complete contentment. The 3 of them were a perfect, self-contained unit of joy. They started to walk away from the window, my father carrying me, my mother's hand linked in his arm. They were heading toward the chestnut vendor, not to Arturo, but to a younger man at the same cart, in the same spot. And as they approached, Arturo, the old vendor from my time, let out a soft gasp of recognition, his eyes fixed on the man selling chestnuts in the past. The scene unfolding before us was a memory brought to life, a perfect tableau of my family's past. My father, young and smiling, carried the smaller version of me on his shoulders. My mother walked beside them, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. They moved through the 60s crowd with an easy grace, a small island of happiness. They were heading directly for the chestnut cart, which stood in the exact same spot as Arturo's. But the man tending the coals was not the old, weathered Arturo I knew. He was a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, with dark, slicked-back hair and a vibrant energy, his movements quick and sure as he turned the chestnuts. From beside me, Arturo let out a soft, choked sound, a noise of profound recognition. His gaze was locked on the young vendor in the past, his eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Was it shock, grief, or wonder? Arturo, whispering, "Antonio." The name was spoken like a prayer, a secret he had held for decades. The young vendor, Antonio, couldn't hear him, of course. He was busy serving a customer, his smile bright and easy. He looked so much like Arturo, but without the weight of the years, without the deep lines etched into his face by time and sorrow. It was like looking at a photograph of a long-lost brother, or perhaps a younger self. The teenager and I turned to look at Arturo. His tough, quiet composure had shattered, leaving behind a raw vulnerability. A single tear traced a path through the wrinkles on his cheek, freezing almost instantly in the frigid air. He was seeing a ghost, just as I was. We were 2 men from the future, haunted by the specters of our own pasts, standing side by side on a magical street corner. The girl looked between us, and her expression softened with a deep, unexpected empathy. We were 3 strangers, adrift in time, bound together by the impossible thing we were witnessing. My family reached the cart. My father greeted the young vendor, Antonio, with the familiar ease of a regular. "Father, V.O." "The usual, Tony," my father called out, his voice full of warmth. Antonio grinned and scooped a generous portion of chestnuts into a small paper bag. As he handed the bag to my mother, his eyes met Arturo's across the chasm of 20 years. For a fleeting second, it felt as though a spark of recognition passed between them, a flicker of understanding that defied logic and time. Antonio's smile wavered for just an instant, a look of faint confusion on his face, before he turned to the next customer. But Arturo had seen it. It was a connection, a message sent and received across the decades. My mother took the bag of chestnuts from Antonio, her gloved fingers brushing his for a moment. She paid him, her movements elegant and sure, and then turned back to my father. She reached up and plucked a hot chestnut from the bag, carefully peeling it while blowing on her fingertips. She didn't eat it herself. Instead, she reached up to the small boy perched on my father's shoulders, to me, and gently placed the warm, smoky nut in my waiting hand. I watched the scene, my heart aching with a bittersweet joy. I remembered that moment. I remembered the perfect warmth of the chestnut against my cold fingers, the smoky taste, the feeling of absolute safety and love. It was the core of every happy Christmas memory I had. This small act of tenderness, a mother feeding her child, was the emotional peak I had been searching for. It was the reason I had returned to this city, to this street. I was chasing the ghost of this feeling, this uncomplicated warmth. Seeing it play out before me was both a blessing and a curse. It was beautiful and perfect, a moment preserved in amber, but it was also agonizingly out of reach. I was a stranger watching my own life through a window, close enough to feel the heat from the glass, but unable to ever go inside again. The regret I carried wasn't just for losing her, but for not realizing in that moment just how precious and fragile that simple pocketful of warmth truly was. My younger self popped the chestnut into my mouth, my cheeks puffed out like a squirrel's, and my parents laughed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. A sound I hadn't heard in 20 years. They were so young, so full of hope. They had no idea of the illness that was waiting in their future, of the years of grief that would follow. They were living in the perfect, sunlit present of that Christmas Eve, and their happiness was a brilliant, painful light. I wanted to shout to them, to tell them to cherish it, to hold on to this moment and never let it go. But my voice was trapped in my throat, a silent scream that only I could hear. The teenage girl reached out and, very gently, touched my arm. It was a small, hesitant gesture, but it grounded me. It pulled me back from the edge of my own overwhelming sorrow and reminded me that I wasn't alone in this strange, impossible dream. Her touch was a small anchor in the swirling sea of the past. I looked at her, and she gave me a small, sad smile of solidarity. She understood. In her own way, she understood what it was to watch happiness from the outside. We stood there together, two lonely souls from the 1980s, watching a family in the 1960s share a bag of chestnuts, a quiet moment of grace that time itself had allowed us to witness. As my parents and my younger self began to walk away, my mother turned back for a moment. Her gaze swept over the crowd. For a heart-stopping second, her eyes seemed to meet mine. It was impossible, a trick of the light and my own desperate, wishful thinking. In that fleeting glance, I felt a jolt of connection, a silent acknowledgement across the years. Her expression was serene, happy, but in the depths of her eyes, I imagined a flicker of the woman she'd become. Wise, resilient, full of a love that could transcend even time. Not recognition, but deep maternal knowing. As if she looked at a stranger, but her soul recognized her son. She made a small, almost imperceptible gesture. She touched her heart with her gloved hand, a private sign. The gesture she used to make when dropping me off at school and when saying goodnight. It meant, I'm with you, always. Seeing her do it now, aimed at the space where I stood, a ghost from her future, felt like a direct message, an unspoken promise, a reassurance that the love I remembered was real and enduring. Not just a memory, a living force, something that hadn't died with her but had woven into the fabric of the universe. strong enough to reach me even here, across an impossible divide. My breath hitched. I couldn't stop the tears from welling. Not pure grief, but a cathartic, painful release. The release of 2 decades of pent-up longing, of unspoken conversations, of a love that had nowhere to go. The invisible weight I carried seemed to lighten, a fraction. The past still hurt, but this moment gave me something I didn't know I needed. Closure. A final, silent goodbye. A final silent, I love you. Sent and received across the years on a snowy Christmas Eve. My family disappeared into the 1960s crowd. Their laughter faded. The vision was over. I stood on the sidewalk, tears cold on my cheeks, a runaway teenager nearby, an old chestnut vendor lost in his own ghostly reunion. The moment with my mother, real or imagined, had been a gift. It didn't change what happened. It didn't erase the loss, but it reframed it. Love, like energy, is never truly lost. It just changes form. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, you get to feel its warmth again, even if just for a moment. While I was lost in my own emotional tidal wave, the teenager beside me was having her own quiet epiphany. Her tough, cynical armor, forged on the unforgiving streets of New York, had completely dissolved. She watched my family interact with a raw, unguarded expression on her face. Her gaze was fixed on the simple affection between my parents, the easy way my father lifted me onto his shoulders, the gentle way my mother offered a chestnut. These were small, ordinary acts of love, but for her, they seemed to be a revelation, a glimpse into a world she may have never known. Her hard expression had been replaced by a profound and heartbreaking wistfulness. She had run away from something, that much was clear. From a home that was broken, from a home that was cold, from a home that was perhaps just empty. Standing here, in this pocket of the past, she was seeing what a family could be. Not a perfect storybook family, but a real one, full of small, warm gestures that, when added up, create the feeling of home. I saw her swallow hard, her eyes glistening. She wasn't just watching my memory, she was superimposing her own longings onto it. She was seeing the love she craved, the safety she lacked, the connection she had been searching for in all the wrong places. This accidental journey into my past had become a mirror for her own life. She clutched her guitar case tighter, her knuckles white. That guitar was her shield. That guitar was her voice. That guitar was her only constant companion. But in this moment, it just looked like baggage, something heavy she was forced to carry. She wasn't thinking about her next meal or a place to sleep for the night. She was thinking about something more fundamental. I saw a flicker of a decision in her eyes. The stubborn defiance she had shown while singing her lonely songs was still there, but it was being reforged into something new. Not just a will to survive, but a resolve to seek something better, something more than just getting by. This strange, shared miracle had taught her something vital about family, something that couldn't be learned from a movie or a book. It was the quiet, everyday reality of it. The way a mother puts her child's warmth before her own. The way a father's tired face lights up at the sight of his wife. These were the truths that had been revealed. For me, it was a reunion with a memory. For her, it was a lesson in what was possible. The past had given me a moment of peace with my grief. It seemed to be giving her a reason to face her future. As the image of my family faded completely, the world around us began to shift again. The transition back was gentle, like waking from a deep sleep. The warm, golden light of the 1960s slowly brightened back to the sharper, colder glare of the 1980s. The rounded cars dissolved, replaced once more by the boxy yellow cabs. The sounds of the street swelled, the cheerful Salvation Army bell giving way to the distant wail of a siren and the tinny beat of a boombox. The hard edges of New York in the Reagan era snapped back into focus. We were back. The snow still fell. The air was still cold, but the magic, porous quality of the last few minutes was gone. The crack in time had sealed itself shut. We stood on the sidewalk, the three of us, blinking in the neon glow as if emerging from a matinee movie into the bright afternoon sun. The payphone receiver was back on its hook, silent and inert, just a piece of grimy plastic. The crowd surged around us once more, a river of puffy coats and determined shoppers, completely oblivious to the fact that the world had just bent and folded upon itself on this very spot. It felt as if hours had passed, but a glance at the clock in a nearby store window showed it had only been a few minutes. Time had been both vast and instantaneous. The teenage girl looked at me, her eyes clear and full of a new quiet determination. She no longer looked like a lost kid, but like a young woman who had made a decision. She gave me a small, grateful nod. Then, she turned, picked up her guitar case, and began to walk away. She walked toward the subway entrance down the block. She wasn't running away anymore. It felt like she was heading somewhere specific, perhaps toward a train that would take her home, or at least toward a choice that wasn't just about surviving another night on the streets. Arturo the vendor seemed to have aged 10 years and shed 20 all at once. The profound sorrow of seeing his lost friend or brother was etched on his face, but so was a sense of peace, of a question finally answered. He looked at me, his gaze deep and knowing. He understood that my ghost and his ghost had, for a moment, shared the same space. He slowly turned back to his brazier, the coals of which had burned low. With a new, deliberate motion, he reached into a sack and added fresh charcoal to the embers. He was stoking the fire, bringing the warmth back, ready to continue his vigil on the corner, a guardian of memory and roasted chestnuts. The return to the present was a gentle collision, the vivid world of the 1960s fading like a photograph left in the sun, leaving the sharp, electric reality of the 1980s in its place. The three of us stood in the aftermath, the snow falling on our shoulders, each of us enclosed in our own bubble of silent contemplation. The girl, with a newfound resolve etched onto her young face, had already turned and walked towards the green globes of the subway entrance. She didn't look back. Her departure wasn't one of flight, but of direction. The past had given her a map, and she was finally ready to follow it. I watched her go until she was swallowed by the descending stairs, a small figure heading back into the world with a purpose she didn't have just minutes before. With the girl gone, it was just me and Arturo. The air between us was thick with the unsaid, with the shared weight of the miracle we had witnessed. He had finished tending to his fire, the new coals glowing brightly, sending up a fresh plume of fragrant smoke. He turned to me, his old eyes looking not at me, but through me, as if he could still see the ghosts of the past lingering in the air around us. He reached into the deep pocket of his thick plaid coat, his gnarled hand fumbling for a moment before withdrawing a closed fist. He held it out to me, his expression solemn, a silent offering. I held out my own hand, and he opened his, dropping a small, heavy object into my palm. It was a coin. Not a quarter for a payphone, but an old silver $50, worn smooth with time. The date on it was 1964, the year of my memory.
The face of John F. Kennedy was soft and blurred from decades of handling. The coin was cold from the winter air, but it felt like it held a latent warmth, a residual heat from a long-lost pocket. I stared at it, this tangible piece of the past, a physical anchor to the fleeting vision we had just experienced. It was an impossible souvenir from a journey that should have left no trace. He always paid with silver. Raspy, quiet, Arturo said. I recognized he was talking about Antonio, the young vendor from the past. He believed it was good luck. Arturo's gaze was distant, lost in a memory that was now sharper and more painful than ever. My brother. A whisper. The words hung in the air between us. A simple, devastating confirmation. He had just witnessed his own younger brother, alive and vibrant, 20 years in the past. The coin wasn't just metal, it was a token of that connection. A keepsake passed from one brother to another across the impossible gulf of time and back to a stranger who had shared the vision. I closed my hand around it, the weight of the silver a heavy solid truth in my palm.
I didn't know what to say. Thank you felt hollow, utterly insufficient for the gift he had just given me. I nodded, a gesture of shared understanding that seemed to be enough. Arturo gave me a sad, small smile. He turned back to his cart and scooped a fresh bag of chestnuts. He handed them to me, refusing the crumpled dollars I tried to offer. This was not a transaction. It was a communion. I took the bag, Warmth seeped into my cold fingers. It mirrored the moment I had just witnessed with my mother. A small act of kindness, a ripple from the past into the present. Holding the warm bag and the cold coin, I felt a profound shift. The gnawing ache of regret that had defined my return to the city softened. It hadn't vanished, but its sharp edges were worn smooth, like the coin in my hand. The vision of my parents wasn't a cruel trick, it was a moment of grace. It showed me their love as something given, a foundation beneath years of grief. The city no longer felt like a landscape of ghosts, but a place of connection. Past and present could touch in unexpected ways. As I stood there in newfound peace, a sound drifted up from the subway entrance. It was music. A faint, clear guitar and a single voice. She was playing on the platform. Her music echoed in tiled acoustics. She wasn't singing the sad folk song anymore. She was singing Silent Night, the same carol as before. But it was different. Her voice, still soft, was no longer a lament. It was filled with fragile, burgeoning hope. Not a song of loneliness, but of quiet celebration. Her song joined the city's symphony, winding up into the cold night air to meet distant sirens, the hum of traffic, and the jingle of holiday bells. The music became a shared thread connecting the girl on the platform, the old vendor on the corner, and me, the man holding a coin from the past. We were no longer lonely individuals adrift. We were part of a larger story, woven together on a snowy Christmas Eve. The small, hopeful miracle wasn't just seeing the past, it was the kindness, the connection, and the shared song that came after. I stood on the corner of 34th Street, caught between the warmth of the chestnuts in one hand and the cold, heavy truth of the 1964 half-dollar in the other. The city had returned to its normal, chaotic rhythm, the crowd surging past, the neon lights buzzing with an electric urgency. The brief, miraculous window into the past had closed, leaving behind only the faintest trace, like the scent of ozone after a lightning strike. Yet, everything felt different. The city I had returned to, a place I associated with loss and regret, had revealed another side of itself. It wasn't just a beast of concrete and noise, it was a keeper of stories. A place where time was not a straight line, but a gentle fold, where the past could press up against the present and leave an impression. The heavy coat of regret I had worn for 20 years had not vanished, but it felt lighter now, transformed into something more akin to a warm blanket of memory. The vision of my parents, young and in love, had not been a torment, but a gift. It showed their happiness as a complete, perfect thing, a moment that existed in its own right, untouched by the sorrow that followed. My grief had been so focused on the ending of their story that I had forgotten the beauty of its brightest chapters. The time slip had given me the perspective I never knew I needed, reminding me that the love I had felt as a child was not a ghost to be mourned, but a foundation upon which my entire life was built. This renewed sense of belonging was the true miracle of the night. It wasn't about changing the past, but about understanding its place in the present. I was no longer a ghost haunting the edges of my own life, but a part of the city's continuous, flowing narrative. Just like Arturo, with his silent vigil for a lost brother, and the girl, with her newfound hope echoing from the subway below, I was a thread in a much larger tapestry. We were all connected by this place, by the shared human experiences of love, loss, the search for warmth on a cold night. The city, in its strange and impersonal way, had offered a moment of profound community. I looked over at Arturo, who was now serving a young couple, his movements steady, his smile small, but genuine. He was a fixture, a guardian of a small flame, but now I knew he was also a guardian of a deep memory, one that he relived with every bag of chestnuts he sold. He was a testament to the quiet resilience of the human heart. The city was full of people like him, each carrying their own invisible histories, their own private ghosts. New York wasn't a place that erased the past. It was a place that absorbed it, letting it live on in the stories whispered on street corners and the echoes of old songs on the cold winter air. I turned and began to walk, heading not away from the city, but into its heart. I was leaving the corner of 34th Street, but I was taking its magic with me. The city was still a beast, loud and sharp and always in a hurry. But I now knew its secret. On a snowy Christmas Eve, if you listened closely enough, you could hear it breathe, you could feel its heartbeat, and you could find a sense of belonging in the most unexpected fold of time.